I want to look now at Aquinas' 5 remedies for sorrow, because I just love them so much, and I love Thomas so much, and I can't wait to meet him in heaven and be like, I'm so sorry for tarnishing your name with my cheap little podcast, but you were so cool. I can't wait. Aquinas gives, as I say, 5 remedies for sorrow. The first, he says, is, it's going to be very obvious, but you can write these down, because if you are feeling sorrowful, these will help. Do something pleasurable. But of course, Aquinas doesn't mean something that's illegitimate or something like that. He means do something pleasurable. And in a legitimate sense, here's what he says. Pleasure is a kind of repose of the appetite in a suitable good, while sorrow arises from something unsuited to the appetite. I love this line. Consequently, in movements of the appetite, listen to this, pleasure is to sorrow what in bodies repose is to weariness. So just what sleep does to a weary body, pleasure will do to a sorrowful soul. Therefore, just as all repose of the body brings relief to any kind of weariness, so every pleasure brings relief by assuaging, satisfying or doing away with any kind of sorrow due to any cause whatever. And here I think it's important to distinguish between, say, doing something that's pleasurable, recreative, and leisurely, as opposed to engaging in like dissociating activities. Because I think, if I was to guess, the greatest sin of our age is that of sloth, which means not just doing nothing, but even doing a lot of things to avoid doing what we ought to do, a sort of sorrow in the face of what's required of us. It's very easy to scroll through my Twitter feed while listening to a YouTube video on the next tab, while receiving a text message from somebody who I now need to respond to, and none of this is leisurely. It seems to me that it's dissociative, which what I mean is you're not actually engaged in what you're doing. And I've fallen into this as well, and I continue to. I'll find myself watching a movie on a laptop, opening up another screen, not even watching the thing I just opened up and am playing, but am reading something else, and you finish something like that, and you vegged out, but at the end of it, you're completely exhausted. It seems to me more and more that the truth is that leisure, or genuine rest, enjoyment in something pleasurable that's recreative, actually takes work. Like, what's easier? Just binging a Netflix series or sitting down, enjoying a coffee and reading something beautiful? Obviously the latter. But whereas the first doesn't bring deep relief, the second does. You may have heard of this if you listen to my podcast, but for the last 3 years, I've taken the entire month of August off of the internet. So tomorrow's my last day, and then you have no idea how happy I am tomorrow afternoon. I have my wife change the passwords on my computers because I have no self-control. I give my phone away to a friend who puts it in his safe because I have no self-control, which is why I'm not happy, right? And then for the entire month of August, I get to seek out leisure. Now, I have to work a lot harder these past few weeks to get ready for August, but I have that blessing of having a job where I can actually take the whole month off. And I don't know if you've ever tried to have like a tech fast or just to be without your phone for a weekend or an overnight. You realize how pathetic you actually are. The other day, I left my phone in the office, and as I was walking towards my elevator, I reached for my phone because I had some brilliant thing that the world needed to know about right then and there, which of course isn't the case. So I think in this tech-saturated culture, doing something that's pleasurable and legitimately recreative might mean doing something like abstaining from technology. The second thing Aquinas says, and I love it because he sounds like my mum did when she was speaking to me when I was 6, is this: pain or sorrow is assuaged or helped by tears. So the second thing you should do if you're experiencing sorrow, says Thomas Aquinas, is weep and groan. So that means don't just cry, it needs to be an ugly cry. Thomas says, tears and groaning naturally assuage sorrow. And here's where he sounds like my mum. But since he's Thomas Aquinas, I won't be too dismissive of it. Because a hurtful thing hurts yet more if we keep it shut up. Isn't that what your mum said to you? Because the soul is more intent on it, whereas if it be allowed to escape, the soul's intention is dispersed as it were on outward things. So tears and groaning. Now, if it's been too long since you've actually cried because you've believed some nonsense about crying being undignified or something, you might have to encourage that through reflecting upon your own sins or listening to beautiful music or detaching from those things that you use to distract yourself. Here's the second reason tears and groaning is good. Because an action that befits a man according to his actual disposition is always pleasant to him. In other words, if you have to act in a way that you do not feel, you've all experienced how unpleasant that is. Like when my wife says, hey, we have that thing tonight, and I go, oh gosh, all I want to do is stay home and read and smoke my pipe or something. But no, we've got to go to this bloody party, you know? And I don't want to be there because I'm an introvert and I don't really like dealing with large amounts of people. I never know how to enter or end a conversation in little clusters that people form. I'm like, do I leave now? I just feel very awkward about it, right? But having to pretend otherwise is exhausting. Hey, how's it going? You know? So Aquinas is saying one of the reasons if you're sorrowful, you should cry and groan is because it befits how you actually feel. Here's the third thing that you should do if you want to do away with sorrow, the sympathy of friends. The sympathy of friends. When one is in pain, it is natural that the sympathy of a friend should afford consolation. And this is why Aristotle indicates a twofold reason. The first is because since sorrow has a depressing effect, it is like a weight whereof we strive to unburden ourselves. So if we unburden ourselves to a friend, it's like the weight is dispersed. And the second reason, he says, is that when we see the affection of somebody for us as we share our pain with them, we're reminded of their love, and that burden is easier to bear. And I think during this COVID lockdown pandemic thing, I think many people have tried to be self-sufficient. I'm going to stay at home, watch Netflix, get DoorDash, have that, Zoom call with the office or something. But actually being with another human being and sharing your joys and sorrows with them is what Aquinas says would be required if you want to alleviate your sorrow. The fourth thing he says is contemplating the truth. It's a fascinating difference between the beasts, right, irrational animals, and us. When irrational animals have their needs met, they go to sleep. When you and I have our needs met, we ask questions, which is why I think it's, no coincidence that philosophy arose when and where it did in ancient Greece, which it was in a relative degree of peace, where people could begin to ask questions about the meaning of life and the meaning of morality, how we should live, and these sorts of things. I'm not sure who said it. If you do, tell me so I can finally attribute this to this person. Somebody said, it sounds like Chesterton, but Trent wrote a book on what the saints never said, so I'm afraid to attribute it to him lest he ask me a bunch of questions to show me I'm an idiot. Okay, so somebody said that beasts or cows chew contentedly in the meadows, while men smoke discontentedly in the bars. I think that's very good, because you and I weren't made merely for the pleasures of this life. We were made for God. And this has actually been used as a sort of argument for God's existence. Listen to what C.S. Lewis wrote. Creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for these desires exist. A baby feels hunger. Well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there is such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, there is such a thing as sex. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. And so that's why I think we shouldn't be terribly surprised when we engage in something beautiful, experience a large degree of happiness, and yet feel unsatisfied. Especially in those times where we feel deeply happy, I think it's usually at those times that we feel our dissatisfaction the most. I remember my wife and I being in San Diego at a little farmer's market and trotting down to the beach, and the sun was brilliant in the sky as it sank beneath the ocean. It was like this lovely red mango color. And my wife and I were just loving each other's company, loving the weather. I remember I just decided to strip down to my boxers and go swimming in the ocean, and I was body surfing. And I remember thinking, I have never been this happy. And I remember thinking at the same time, is this all there is? As Peter Kraft has said, those deepest experiences of happiness and pleasure we encounter seem to be nothing more, or not, I shouldn't say nothing more, but seem to be a finger pointing to something else. A prophetic moment that says this is not all there is. So we ought to contemplate the truth because we were made for God, and it's a tremendous beautiful activity to reflect upon things like that, which is why you're here today. You find some pleasure in apologetics, thinking about the deep questions. If you didn't, you wouldn't be here unless somebody dragged you here. Here's the final thing Aquinas gives us, and this is my all-time favorite. Fifth, if you're feeling sad, here's the fifth thing you could do. Sleep and baths. If you're feeling sad, you could sleep and have a hot bath. Why does Aquinas say this? Because we are not merely ghosts in the machine. We are our bodies. Our bodies are equally a part of who we are. So when we can soothe the body in an appropriate sense, we also soothe ourselves. Aquinas says, sorrow, by reason of its specific nature, is repugnant to the vital movement of the body, and consequently, whatever restores the bodily nature to its due state of vital movement is opposed to sorrow and assuages it. Moreover, such remedies, from the very fact that they bring nature back to its normal state, are causes of pleasure, for this is precisely in what pleasure consists. Therefore, since every pleasure assuages sorrow, sorrow is assuaged in such like bodily remedies. So, a massage or a hot bath or even a glass of wine, this is a bodily experience. These things, I think, are ways to alleviate sorrow. So putting these things together, if you're super sad here today, here's something that you could do. You could, think about the deep questions in life, which is what this apologetics conference, of course, is all about. You could go home, you could, chat with a friend about what you're going through right now. You could have a large glass of red wine, a hot bath, a good night's sleep, and I think that's a nice, and then you're going to have a cry too at some point. I'm not sure when you want to do that, before or after the wine. I'll leave that up to you. Right, much more could be said about Aquinas and what he has to say about sorrow. For example, and I'll end with this, he goes through a list of the things that we seek out to make us happy and argues for why they cannot be our ultimate good. So, things like fame and money and pleasure and honor. He shows why these things can't make us happy. He doesn't just say they can't, like my mum did. Money can't make you happy. And I went, yeah, I'll show you, right? Or as one comedian said, okay, people say money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a jet ski. And I've never seen anybody sad on a jet ski, right? But when you read through the Summa and you see what Aquinas has to say, what you find out is his arguments are incredibly compelling. God and God alone is the fulfillment of our desire. We will not be fully happy until we see him, please God, face to face in the next life. We can experience an imperfect happiness in this life, and that to the degree in which we grow in virtue. So, thank you very much for listening, and the book is available at the bookstore if you want it, and it will make you happy. And if it doesn't make you happy, whatever fraction I get from the sales will make me... No, it won't. Oh, goodness.